Hello everyone, and welcome to the online lecture for today, the class that we are missing unfortunately for today, September 9th, since I'm out of town. And once again, I do apologize both for being gone as well as for the quality of this video. I had a video recorded for you and then something happened and now I don't. And so now I'm forced to do this from a place where it's not the most ideal lighting, it's not the most ideal audio, nothing is quite ideal, but I wanna make sure the information gets to you so that you can both perform a quality lab today, as well as get the information you need to keep moving forward going into our class on Wednesday. So we're going to talk, kind of finalize some brief information about energy and expenditure and fatigue, and talking more about some efficiency, economy, as well as fatigue as it relates to heart rate as well. So a few points, starting foremost with the concept of exercise efficiency. When we refer to work output, how much force you're able to produce over a given distance, how fast you're able to move, any of those kinds of factors, and the energy you're expending while doing so, the more efficient you are, the less energy you expend at hopefully higher outputs, or as you get more conditioned, you would perform the same level of output, but your energy expenditure would drop. And of course, the ideal, as we just said, would be increased output, lower expenditure. But what you ultimately want to be doing over time is expending less energy, not more, to perform similar or greater tasks, so to speak. Okay, that's the ideal to be getting as far as exercise efficiency. Yes, the basics of neuromuscular exercise efficiency does not come easy. It takes time. Literally, the right fibers, muscle fibers, type 1, type 2A, type 2X, must fire at the right time in the right sequence. That's coordination. Coordination improvement can occur a little bit from a given day with proper technique, proper programming in a given session, warming up and cooling down, but that's not typically going to see a great improvement. Probably will see some. If you know what you're doing, or the athlete you're working with, or the individual you're working with can make small improvements in a given day, yes, you can see efficiency improve over the course of a given day or session. However, that's not going to be tremendously strong compared to what they were getting before. It's usually going to take much longer than that. We're looking for the right level for today, find the right level of intensity, the right level of duration, the right level of frequency as far as what level of training you're working on for today. Those things are very, very important in a given session to ensure efficiency. If you see a form break down, you see them getting worse, obviously they're becoming more inefficient, we're wasting time or wasting effort. That is not the goal with exercise. We're not looking for your effort in and of itself. I know we often talk that way, but that really is not helping us improve with exercise performance or health in general. Through pushing with effort without getting increased or at least maintaining output. RPE, as we just kind of mentioned, that's your effort. Scale 1 to 10, 10 being the highest possible effort you could possibly give, or saying in 10, this feels as hard as it could possibly feel for me right now. I can't give you any more output from what I feel I can give right now. That's a 10, right? A 1 would be, well, you'd have to be asleep. There's no way. That's extremely low, right? Heart rate, we're talking about, generally speaking, we're talking about the ventricular contraction, ventricular filling, and with that heart rate, what we're talking about is how hard your heart has to work to deliver oxygen and nutrients to the tissues. Okay, so theoretically, we don't have to have much of a heart rate increase, if any at all, to deliver proper oxygen and nutrients to the tissues that are utilizing those nutrients and that oxygen. Okay, force output, as we said many times before, we want that to be the primary crux for how we gauge performance. We want to be talking about increasing your speed, increasing your tempo in some situations, not every situation, but certainly whether you're handling body weight load or external load of some kind, we want to see increased control, sure, but we want to see you moving with more fluidity, smoothly, and be able to have greater force output, okay? Recent activity is what you're basing your programming on for today as well. We're talking about today's RMR, your resting metabolic rate for today, and that's based upon what you've done the last 48, 72 hours, mostly, let alone what's happened in the previous months, right? Certainly the nutrition you've had recently, the sleep you've gotten recently, your life stress recently, the exercise you've had recently, the final four or the big four, however you want to think about it, big components. And of course, that general conditioning over the last 3 to 4 months, if we're looking at trying to increase our intensity, we have to have had more moderate or lighter intensity type work over the previous 3 to 4 months. Or we really shouldn't be doing what we're doing today if we don't have any background in somewhere between activity, between rest and the level expected for today. can't jump from 0 to 60. If you do that to your car, you hit that gas and you jump out of your driveway, the car may give it to you, just like your body will give it to you, but the car is going to break down. Unlike your body will find a way to keep going no matter what. The car will just shut down. Something will not work, and then it doesn't work anymore, and you got to get repaired. Huge pain in the rear, right? A lot of cost, a lot of time away from what you need to be doing to drive your car. The same thing happens with your body. We just don't recognize it as much because you're not paying attention. Consequently, you wait too long to repair it, so to speak, and have major, major problems, injuries, among other things, and illnesses. Career conditioning, we talk about training age. How long have you been training? How many months, how many days, how many years? From a standpoint of doing the type of activity we're talking about right now. That is your career conditioning, or your training age. It's a very popular term we refer to. Your running economy, unlike exercise efficiency, although efficiency definitely affects economy, economy doesn't necessarily affect efficiency, okay? Because we're talking about a specific work rate. We're talking about a specific distance you're trying to cover, or a specific speed you're trying to go, a specific running speed or distance you're trying to gauge in a certain amount of time, hopefully, and you want to be able to see how much energy is expended during that time. So theoretically, it should happen over time, right? If you're running a mile, then you're either getting faster over that mile, or you're keeping the same speed over that mile, but you're expending less energy. That would both those things would increase your running economy. And running economy typically improves activities that we're talking about aerobically, 3 minutes and beyond. Okay, for running economy. Not so much talking about sprinting. We're not talking about glycolytic type work. We're talking about aerobic type work for improving running economy. All right, longer distance or middle distance type work from a standpoint of duration of activity and distance. But exercise efficiency, of course, affects that. Because if you don't move well, it's going to be hard to have proper running economy. If you're having a difficulty producing proper output, we're clearly going to have a great deal of difficulty, whatever specific work rate we're aiming for today with our running economy. Efficiency will affect that. But obviously, running economy is not necessarily all exercise efficiency, because not everything is running. So that's why there's not a direct response or relationship both directions with these two concepts. And of course, again, for increased force output, or in this case, more likely speed, is more the goal with less energy when we talk about running economy. Now, form of exertion does matter. We mentioned this in class. If you're running on a treadmill, you can't expect that necessarily to transfer to running outside. Your speed on the treadmill will not necessarily be the same speed as it is outside. The treadmill forces you to maintain the same pace. That is not the way you run when you're running. Your body speeds up, slows down, speeds up, slows down. It just does not. It does not keep the same exact pace. That is not something that's typical to see with anyone, regardless of speed or capability. Okay, cycling, a little easier to maintain something like that. You can see the RPM gauge on a bike when you're in a gym and whatnot. Of course, when you're out and about, biking around, you got hills, you got different terrain you're on. That's going to play a very different role as well. It's not going to be the same response. So you got to be clear whatever we're looking for and how we train. Want to make sure that the movement skill itself is similar for the most part. Of course, if we're on land, we got to be working on land. If we want to get better on land, we got to be better in the pool. We got to work in the pool. Now, if you want to be better on the bike, you got to get on the bike. You'll see some crossover when you get stronger in general. There's no question, more flexible in general, more conditioning in general. You will see some small improvements, probably to some extent, but they'll be very small. And again, I gave my very anecdotal experience, but it's so true. When I was running at my highest level of endurance, when I was able to run just a little bit over 5-minute repeat miles, my swimming was nowhere near on that par. It was probably it was better than the average, but it was nowhere near anyone competitive in swimming, not even close. A solid high school swimmer would have no problem beating me easily, probably lapping me in any sort of middle distance type race or longer distance race relative to running when I was a whole different level. It just doesn't correlate exactly. The transfer is not the same depending upon how you perform activities, what forces are at play internally and externally, let alone movement skill. Okay, a lot of things going on there. So to improve efficiency, we're talking about you get some improvement, as we said very briefly, by what you do with your warming up, your cooling down, the programming for today, making sure you're training at the right level based upon your heart rate response, what's going on. But it takes many months and years to really see major improvements there. And again, your textbook referred to something like 8 to 12 weeks for a VO2 max improvement. You can improve VO2 max for far longer than that, for years. Okay, and I'll give you more specific data on that later. Use of static stretching, getting autogenic inhibition, where you hold a point of first contraction for 20 to 30 seconds, very light contraction, right? The first point of muscular contraction at that point, when the muscle's lengthening, trying to get a little bit of stretch to benefit for the stretch. The GTO, the Golgi tendon organ or organs, are trying to override the muscle spindles. If you have too much of a contraction, there is no override. Okay, it's just going to be fatiguing. Okay, and you're producing too much force, and you don't get more flexibility when you're trying to create greater levels of force. It doesn't work like that. Of course, dynamic stretching, it works more toward movement or by movement, as opposed to a static hold for a autogenic inhibition response. Dynamic stretching, we're talking about reciprocal inhibition. When you move one way, your muscle fibers that move you in one direction are working, and everything that would work that would try to pull you the other direction naturally has to relax and not perform activity, otherwise you don't get the proper motion, and you do get some stretching benefit from that. So when people talk about lifting weights and you go down with the weight in your hands and they say you're getting a stretch at the bottom there, no, you're really not, because the muscles are active against that load. However, as you push that load off of you, or as you pull the load towards you, whatever would have normally taken you the other direction is currently relaxing and loosening and gaining flexibility if you're moving well. Okay. The key, of course, is to improve efficiency is to first move slow, right? Be stable, not looking for very complicated, complex motions or unstable surfaces. Want to be very stable with what we do before we start worrying about being unstable in any factor or any fashion. Low loads, what's low? Depends on the person, but want to be low for today, right? Make sure you can handle it, then we'll move up. A thing I always tell people, someone who says, I can handle more weight than that. Great, show me you can handle a lighter weight, then we'll move up, as opposed to going with what you want to do, because that's rarely what you probably should be doing. And if you are able to do that, great, we'll move up. Right? Reduced range of motion to start. When we say reduced range of motion, if you have to dramatically change, if you normally would get 150 degrees of shoulder motion, which is from a little bit into extension behind you all the way upward, bring your arm up and above and slightly behind you. If you can't get proper range of motion within a few degrees, it's probably you're reducing it too much. You may be better off doing some other activity altogether because you don't have the efficiency to perform the basic action right now. That's really important. Technique is king. Now, running economy improvement, again, we said performance that lasts minutes, not seconds, okay? You got to run to that desired rate for running economy for at least 2 to 3 minutes with rest of no more than 30 to 45 seconds because it's supposed to be improving your aerobic response. You don't have a long rest. A lot of information out there, we often have talked about this. We'll talk about really odd arrangements of work and rest, and it's pretty clear they don't understand what energy system they're working on. They're not really clear about what muscle fibers they're working on. They're just talking about work and rest with what would probably consider to be more anecdotal information. Well, we've done this before, we've seen some responses. Well, when you perform more work or try to increase your speed or move more load, you're going to see some improvement to some extent if you do things at least reasonably well. But the problem is you can make a lot of mistakes, do a couple things right, and you think everything you're doing is correct when in fact what it was is 2 things were correct and 8 things were wrong. So you do all 10. That doesn't make any sense. And that's what we're trying to avoid. Okay. Break it up into sets, which we often do. That's where sets came from, by the way. Is breaking up work when you can't perform work for over longer periods. You break it up in shorter periods with breaks between to slowly build up toward endurance. If in this case, that is the goal for running economy, right? So we would do at least 2 or 3 minutes to make sure it's at least aerobic work. Okay, running only for 30 seconds or 60 seconds is fine for teaching the skill of running, teaching exercise efficiency. If you're trying to work on aerobic oxidation, endurance type work, you got to go for at least 2 to 3 minutes because you got to start getting into the aerobic oxidation energy system, with the type 1 muscle fibers being the primary muscle fibers working through that whole range into a more of an aerobic state. If you don't, it's going to be hard to see much improvement in aerobic oxidation response or your endurance, okay? With no more than 30, 45 seconds, because you don't need more than 60, 70% ATP at the most, and you better be able to recover that much in 30 to 45 seconds, or you're just not ready to be doing this at all right now, whoever you are. We generally say expect 20 to 60 minutes a session for improving running economy / endurance, improving your overall cardiovascular type improvement or efficiency, we should say, at least 3 to 5 times weekly. To be really clear, really clear, should be 7 times a week, okay, to some extent of some kind. What intensity depends very much on the person's readiness. However, generally speaking, for those days, not every day, those days you're looking for improving your VO2 max / running economy, efficiency as a whole. We're trying to train at or near that lactate threshold, which, as we said, that lactate threshold is much lower than your VO2 max. We'll talk more about that in a second. And you're doing that for at least 8 to 12 weeks. You're just to improve it a little bit. Doesn't mean you stop doing it after that, but you can be expecting significant improvement in your VO2 max / your running economy, which your running economy is a lesser state than your VO2 max, but it's also specific to a given distance or work rate. Okay. That said, And I should say with the lactate threshold, remember, we're talking about somewhere between 40 to 50% of our VO2 max is your lactate threshold for someone who's deconditioned, doesn't have any background at all. So whatever they can run in 10 to 20 minutes, 10 to 12 minutes for an athlete, you take by less than half of that, generally speaking. It's a rough estimate, but about half of that is probably their speed for something they could continually do for long periods. Whereas someone who gets more conditioned can produce lactate threshold type work close to 80-85% VO2 max. If they're well conditioned, well trained, probably pretty good genetics on top of that. They can get close to the VO2 max pace and keep it for long periods. It's pretty impressive stuff. Whereas some elite athletes can actually maintain VO2 max type pace. Whatever they can do in 10 to 12 minutes, they can keep that pace for 20, 30 minutes and beyond. It's very, very impressive stuff. That's very unusual. Now, as we talk about heart rate and cardiac output, your heart rate, again, is ventricular contraction, ventricular filling. Blood pushed out of the heart, so to speak, or ejected out of the heart from the ventricles to get to the body. Superior vena cava going back down, going down and out and through the body, right? And superior and inferior vena cava playing a role there with the in and out of the blood. We'll talk more about that from the structure of the heart later on. That said, that heart rate, the bum 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 contraction is the louder beat, we should say, or the louder noise. The filling is actually more the softer one. Okay, that bum 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 bum, softer one, second one, that's the filling. Okay, the stroke volume, something we can't measure without really expensive equipment, okay, is the amount of blood that gets pushed out with each ejection of blood from the ventricles. That said, we want to have that be very, very high. The higher that is, the less the heart rate has to be up to make sure we get proper oxygen and nutrients to the tissues. How do we work on stroke volume and improve it? Guess what? Work at or near the lactate threshold. It's going to see the most tremendous benefit, certainly in the short term and probably long term, for improving overall cardiac output, cardiovascular efficiency, reduced heart rate at similar responses. Stroke volume is the key with that, okay? Resting heart rate, that's your 0% intensity. That's you laying down, doing nothing. Right after you woke up, that's your resting heart rate. It's what you're asked to do in your lab for doing your lab work for today/tomorrow before the Wednesday class. So that's resting heart rate. And that will change on a given day, but we're going to go with just one sample for one day for you doing it for your lab. Initial heart rate, the next heart rate you'll then take, and the next heart rate you'd really be focused on, generally speaking, with exercise, is the one you have right before you start to train. So before you start running, before you start jogging, before you start walking, in whatever's part of your training session for today, or lifting weights, whatever you're doing, okay? You want to take your heart rate right then before you start doing anything. Walk up to that gym door or walk up to the piece of machinery you're going to work with first or whatever it is. Take the heart rate right now, 60 seconds. That is your initial heart rate. That's our baseline for the training session itself. And over time, like all heart rates, we want to see them be going down at similar or greater levels of output. Then the training heart rate is, technically, we'd have a heart rate monitor on you. Theoretically, you'd like to have that on you, that transmitter around your chest with a watch on your wrist so you can watch your heart rate the entire time you're training. Most people don't do that. It's a major mistake in not getting you better biofeedback, what's going on with you, regardless of your belief of what your effort is. That is your actual internal effort, how hard your heart is having to work, right? So that training heart rate, what I'm going to want you to do, if you don't have a heart rate monitor, is every 3 to 5 minutes, preferably 3, but maybe no more than 5, depending on what you're doing exactly. Take a heart rate and maybe keep taking it like at intervals. If it's a very consistent type workout, it's even easier to do this. If it's like a cardiovascular type workout, which is theoretically what I'd like you to be doing. Not some variation in lift weights, rest, lift weights, rest, lift weights, rest. You can still do that. It's going to be harder to gauge unless you're doing the same exact exercise the entire way through. Preferably by something for 20, 30 minutes long, which I really want you to be doing for this to get a reasonable understanding of what's happening. You're going to be taking the heart rate every 3 to 5 minutes, put that heart rate down, and then you're going to average it out to call the average heart rate. That's part of your lab as well. Maximum heart rate. You're asked to do your peak heart rate, not the same as your maximum heart rate. Your peak heart rate is the highest heart rate during the training session today. It's not on this slide, but there's no really a PHR. But your peak heart rate would be the highest heart rate you achieved, not a goal to achieve, but that you got over the course of your training session. Okay, maximum heart rate is a theoretical number that we're going to use briefly for 220 minus your age as a theoretical max heart rate. That's not exact. Your actual max heart rate would mean death. Okay. And hopefully you can't hear what's going on in the background because I'm out of town. My daughter is with me, and so you can maybe hear her in the background. I do apologize for that. Hopefully you can't hear that and have no idea what I'm saying right now. But that said, I do apologize, okay? Now, fatigue, we've talked about it. I want to make some things are clear to help you with your post today. We're talking about how that can affect your heart rate That is not exactly part of the post that we, or the lecture we had, but that'll absolutely increase your heart rate. You're feeling worn down, your output will be down, heart rate will be up, RPE will probably also be up, right? You're going to have a lot of hormonal imbalances, stuff you can't really tell unless you actually took blood to find out what's really going on. But you can bet if heart rate's up, RPE is up, output is down, you probably got some fluctuations negatively with hormone response right now. You probably have too much epinephrine or norepinephrine imbalance for a standpoint of adrenaline being secreted. You probably have maybe too much cortisol, probably due to some extent, probably not significant. Remember we said cortisol is not secreted significantly above until you get above 75% VO2 max. Pretty significant pace, significant duration slash intensity of work before that really increases significantly. One sprint as hard as you can, it's probably not going to have dramatic increases in cortisol. I mean, theoretically it could, but it'll have some increase. You won't see dramatic increases until you've gone for longer durations at higher intensities, both, okay? But remember we said the basic fatigue reasons why you're fatiguing, getting worn down, why heart rate might be working harder too. Decreased ATP availability or ability to utilize ATP, the increased presence of blood lactate accumulation, not lactic acid, blood lactate accumulation, excess hydrogen ion accumulation, that's that breaking off of that bond, ATP becomes ADP, inorganic phosphate breaks off, and all the waste products as a result of that transfer of energy. So we're talking about the excess hydrogen ions that are created there in that situation, excess waste products are increasing dramatically the more you increase your intensity or your duration at the same intensity, both. The longer you go or the harder you go, you'll see more of this, okay? And that said, after a while, it blocks the binding sites to get proper ATP replenishment to the muscle fibers to get the proper muscular contraction. And again, we'll talk more about that too. PNS versus CNS fatigue. Make sure you recognize again that overall your body is just tired. Everything you do is tiring and difficult. That's central nervous system fatigue. Peripheral nervous system fatigue. So when you have one area that's worn down, but not everything is. Your legs are fine, but your arms are beat up because of something you did, or vice versa, or anything like it. We don't want to confuse peripheral versus central nervous system fatigue. Peripheral fatigue, we can still perform activities, maybe at normal levels, versus something else that doesn't utilize those joint actions, those muscle fibers that are worn down peripherally. Okay. However, if it's more CNS type fatigue, you might want to take it easy, like we talked about, that 40-60% VO2 max range, low to moderate intensity to be able to improve your recovery for today and hopefully come back tomorrow and go to higher intensity. Reduce the intensity, reduce the range of motion, increase your recovery between sets, right? Increase your recovery between days. Water and carb drink, we talked about that for just less than an hour type training. Every minute you're doing, think about this, every 10 to 15 minutes, 6 to 8 ounces of water over the course of your training. And if you're training moderately, highly intense, you got to replace the water you lost. To be really clear, whatever if it felt intense, call it intense. Replace that with water, okay? And of course, if it's highly intense, we would get into like carb protein shake post training, but we're not there yet. We're not talking about that stuff just yet. But definitely during activity it's an hour or longer that's at moderately high into the intense, probably 60-70% VO2 max or longer for an hour or more. Something that's more glycolytic and it's really long, anything like that is going to be requiring you to be drinking carb solution drink every 15-20 minutes, 6 to 8 ounces, okay, for the entire time. So that's our brief little lecture here for today. Once again, sorry for the audio and the visual not being ideal. We won't have that again. We'll make sure that doesn't happen again. Otherwise, we're back in class on Wednesday, the 11th. Make sure that you check in the course announcements there in Blackboard to make sure you complete your discussion board post course from last week. You want to make sure you complete that lab report form number 2. Make sure it's done by Wednesday. You're going to need to take your resting heart rate in the morning, your initial heart rate before you train, training heart rate average and peak during your training, and a heart rate post an hour after you train, and then also right before you go to bed. It's a lot of heart rate checks. Not really difficult to do, but a lot of checks. So by the time you get this, if it's already been Monday, you're going to have to do it on Tuesday. I don't care what you do for exercise. I prefer you do something cardiovascular, but something to make sure you get at least a reasonable idea to be able to fill that form out correctly, or well, I should say, to give good data, and make sure you take the time to make the effort to really not just do your discussion board post well like you have been doing, but write good data in those lab reports. Too many people said, well, it was different than I expected in some of the, how is it different from your expectations? To have expectations means you must think about this in advance, right? Or you have no expectations. That's why you kind of go, I don't know what to say, because you didn't think about it in advance. I want you to read that form, think about what you're expecting to see heart rate wise, what you think is probably going to happen, then write that stuff down. It makes a lot more sense, gives you a lot more data information to evaluate. Okay, email or call if you have questions. I won't be able to get to it until late Tuesday because of my transitioning and timing coming back to California. That said, have a great beginning of your week, not so much rest of your week, and we will see you very soon on Wednesday. Thanks, folks.